How do you become a front-end web developer in 2022? The first is you need to understand the difference between raster and vector. You need to be able to use and manipulate in both. You need to understand Photoshop, you need to understand Illustrator, you need to understand InDesign, you need to understand Adobe XD. There are loads of other tools as well. And if you look in the job section for user experience designer, front-end web developer, you'll find a range of tools. Do you need to understand all those tools? Yes, you do, right? The reason is that you need to enter the job market. Therefore, you need to understand quite a bit about that tool that they are offering a job for. So that would be quite handy. Or, of course, you can filter the job search based on the ones that you like. But it's really good to understand more than one. And often in graphics, especially the higher you go, whether you're an Illustrator type or a graphic design type, you will always be using more than one tool. So the first is understand vector and raster, understand the different applications that you can use to deliver output of that nature. That means that you need to have understanding of graphics. You need a good eye, a good understanding of white space, balance, contrast. You need to understand what values mean. So you need to understand what color might mean. Right? So there is not a coincidence, it's not a coincidence that green is used in financial, right? There's something to learn there. You need an eye for detail, and this is something you have to develop in a pragmatic way, doing lots of things, doing tutorials and learning. And this is because you need to do everything from wireframing, right? Understanding what a customer wants, or understanding what your boss wants you to do, understanding what the user wants to do, and then developing some kind of wireframe or some kind of screen analysis and flow analysis. Where does this person move from and to, and so on. And so you not only need to make it look good and have an understanding of that, but you also need to understand flow and users. And so it's very important to understand user experience things. What do people do when they look at a screen? Do their eyes follow a set thing? Do they look at the top left always? What is most important on the site? What is going to drag and draw their attention? So these are the kinds of things you need to know. Eye for detail is very important so that you can pick up on what has the majority focus on a page. Sometimes a page is very, very noisy. How do you distill it? Detail is important. You need to have a good knowledge of trends, and you should really pay attention to other applications. What are the top applications right now? What kinds of style do they have? Is it popular? Do people enjoy it? Something like Netflix has a bunch of people working day and night, so to speak, right, on what makes their app best. And that is something that you can learn by just looking at their app. You can say, well, they've done it that way. They're not using shadows. It's not cluttered. They're using images. They're doing it like this. And it's something you can pick up on and learn. Now, in terms of technologies or programming technologies, because in terms of being a front-end web developer, you should know how to develop. It's not just graphics, and it's not just layout and user experience, but it's also actually doing some coding. And for that, you absolutely have to have the Trinity, the Holy Trinity. You need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now in JavaScript, you can go ahead and learn all different types of frameworks if you like. That's good. In CSS, you can learn some frameworks there. All good. But the important bit is, do you understand the fundamentals of the native versions of those technologies? And that's firstly the thing that is most important. All the other frameworks thereafter is just icing on the cake. So you really need to go in and learn those things. Another aspect of technology, and it's not so much coding, but really taking a 500-foot view of it, is understanding content management systems, learning management systems, WordPress, for example, Joomla, Drupal, these kinds of things. What are the most popular, and can you manipulate things within that environment? And not only for the usefulness of understanding that platform, but also how do they do things? Can I do something in this proprietary system that mimics something in that system? They've done it, they've spent loads of time to determine whether it's a good or bad thing to do. I can jumpstart my understanding by doing something that they do. You benefit from users who understand that ecosystem, and now you've done it. When they move over, they automatically, intuitively understand what you've done because you've kind of cloned an idea. And cloning an idea, or rather patterns of ideas, is not something to be frowned upon in user experience. We want to provide something that is unique, but we also want something that is familiar, that we can click and understand intuitively as we go. But what do you need to know to become an intermediate? Well, I've got a few more things here. And we're going to go through this little list, and this is an intermediate, and I've even got an expert level for you coming after that, so stay tuned. Well, the first thing I would suggest is that you learn how to customize at least one of these content management systems. WordPress, for example, has a plugin, it has PHP coding, it has an API. It would be recommended to learn more detail about that kind of customization. How do you build a theme? How do you build a plugin? JavaScript is something that you're never quite gonna get a handle on, to be honest. People with 20 years experience, I think it's about that. I think JavaScript is about 30 years old, something like that. At least it feels like I've been using it for that long. I think I was using it back in 94, 95, somewhere like that. JavaScript is evolving all the time and is a very haphazard, complicated, flexible, and amazing language. And you're never gonna quite get to grips with all of it. What you need to do, though, to move from junior to intermediate is really get a hold of it. You really need to not just understand how to use something in jQuery, but you need to know how to build a library, how to do something real, how to manipulate the HTML DOM, how to manipulate the CSS DOM. You need to understand JavaScript and not build very slow sort of performing code. You need to be able to build something that's reusable and shared across all of the resources on your website as a minimum. So JavaScript is very important. TypeScript is something that I would recommend, but there are other types of abstractions above JavaScript that you can go off and learn. And TypeScript at the time of recording this is a very, very popular version of that. TypeScript is something that you should learn and understand, if not just for the practicality of how that affects JavaScript, and your JavaScript knowledge will be greatly improved. The next thing is calling server API with client technologies. So using JavaScript, maybe the fetch command, things like that, using curl, maybe PHP server side, knowing how to connect to an API, make a call to that API, get data and load it. You really need a strong understanding of that if you're going to call yourself an intermediate. I would recommend that as a junior, you're already well on your way to understanding that, should you be called on doing things like that. But to be called an intermediate, somebody with 3 years experience, you really should have that by now. If you've got 3 years in front end, if you want to get into this game, knowing how to call APIs is very, very important. The next thing to understand to become an intermediary is at least one of the frameworks. And, we're talking Vue.js, React, Angular, things of that nature, Nuxt, Svelte, things like that. Understanding at least one of these gives you a little bit of a head start in terms of understanding maybe hybrid development, maybe cross mobile to web development and so on, and gives you a clear direction to move in. There are a lot of jobs available for React, for example. It might be something to get into. So what do you need to move from intermediate to senior or something like that? Well, you really need brand marketing understanding, right? How to brand something, how to market something. You need to know A/B testing, you need soft skills like team leadership, and you probably need around 10 of these life cycles, right, to really push and promote yourself into that higher category. And of course, the larger the project, the better. You can cut your teeth faster by doing a larger project, but you can also do lots of smaller projects and gain an entirely different type of experience. You can get to the end of a project or get to seemingly the end of an iteration, or what they call an increment in some circles, in the agile circles, quicker, and therefore you can learn something about output. But really, to become a senior, you have to have a lot of team dynamics, communication, customer relations. You really need to understand the bigger picture of marketing and branding, and user experience and flow and all the things that come with that. So a quick recap. To get started, you need to manipulate photos, manipulate graphics, draw a little bit graphics, manipulate filters, change colors, do that sort of stuff. Know balance and contrast, white space, font sizes, fonts. You need to understand that stuff. It's a very core basic thing that you need to understand, right? How do I include a custom font, right? Very, very important for basics. You need an eye for detail. You need good knowledge of app trends, user interface trends. You need to know HTML and CSS and at least one content management system. Moving to an intermediary, you need to be able to customize a WordPress or something like that. You need to customize it, build a plugin, do something like that. And you need to know JavaScript, a lot more JavaScript than you did when you were a junior. You need to be able to call server APIs, use a framework such as React or Nuxt or Angular, something like that. And you need to gather some experience. So you need 3+ years of experience building all that stuff and getting familiar. To move to a senior level, you need communication skills, teamwork. You need to be able to run a team, lead a team, greater information about or knowledge about the user experience, the marketing, the brand, the effect, the feel, how to run such a thing. And that comes with probably around 10 life cycles, which I'm calling 8 months. So think of it in those terms. We're talking 6-7 years. You're going to get yourself to some kind of senior level expert. Well, it's endless. Be as good as you can be in all of these things. So that's a sort of a summary of what you need to know to become a front-end web developer in 2022. It didn't go into too much detail, but give you a nice overview of what you need to do. So best of luck if this is your field and this is what you want to get into. Thanks for watching.